The facts are indisputable. Black is beautiful. Brand new day. Back to business as usual. See, we built empires and engineers and scientists. Gave a glimpse into the past through Egyptian hieroglyphs. Black is beautiful.
This is The Real Deal with Emiel, brought to you by MHG, your local year-round trusted insurance partner. Let MHG help you for free. Good afternoon, Kansas City. You are listening to The Real Deal with Emiel, and I am your host, Emiel Cleaver. This show is brought to you by Phillips West Public Relations and Communications and is sponsored by MHG, your local trusted insurance partner. MHG has an open enrollment center located on the corner of 18th and Vine. Now today I have a special guest. Today my guest is Kansas City, Missouri Police Chief Darryl Forte. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to be here.
Now, first of all, I want to congratulate you on the many honors that you have received. You are also the first African-American police chief in this department. And I had to let you know that my producer, Carrie Stapleton with Phillips West Public Relations, and my father are big fans of yours. They think you're doing a great job. My father, Congressman Emanuel Cleaver.
Thank you.
So I had to let you know that off top. Now, I want to get right into it. In lieu of all the recent shootings, there has been a police research group called the Police Executive Research Forum, and they've analyzed some of these shootings and have come to the conclusion that some of these shootings could have been prevented, and they came up with something called tactical engagement. Can you talk about this group and how you are implementing these recommendations?
Yes, I'm a member of the Police Executive Research Forum, and in Kansas City, we started implementing the tactical disengagement even before they finished their study. This is something I knew early on when I was a young police officer, something we needed to do. I felt like we engaged too many people for the wrong reason, and if we would just take our time to step back and assess the situation properly, we wouldn't engage so many people. So I saw a problem even at an early 10 years as a police officer 30 years ago. So I knew when I became chief, and if I tried to implement tactical disengagement, which some people think is tactical retreat or a retreat, that's not really a proper term for police personnel, because nobody wants to be known as a coward or labeled as somebody that's going to retreat from danger. So due to all the things happening around the country, the critical incidents and the civil unrest and things like that, this was the perfect time for me to deploy that. Again, 3 years ago, they would have probably tried to run me out of the police department, but timing is everything, and I'm learning that as a police chief.
Okay, so this research forum, they've made a statement. If police leaders are going to change the culture on this point, they must clearly tell the officers what they want them to do and back it up in terms of evaluations and rewards. How does this statement apply to your system of employees, and how have you recognized officers, I should say?
And we do that because when the officer is involved in something, before in this organization and the police culture, it was always stated we don't second guess our officers.
Right. I
second guess every critical incident. I don't care if it's a police shooting, use of force. I second guess that. That's my job, so we can do better. And again, I think, and I'm not trying to be mean toward anybody, but we've had police organizations around the country where leaders, predominantly middle-aged white males, didn't understand the population that they were policing. Mm-hmm. And I was raised in Kansas City. I've been here all my life. I understand the culture. I've done street-level surveys. I've been out on the corner talking to people. I ride the police motorcycle and engage people. Left letters on faith-based leaders' doorsteps at an early age. So I engaged the community early on. So I knew if I became chief, was appointed chief, there's some things that I could do that other people probably wouldn't have felt comfortable doing. Even hotspot policing, where we saturate some areas. When you look at out in the community, before I was appointed chief, I looked at the stats and probably less than 12 square miles of Kansas City, when you put 4 different areas together, over 52% of our homicides were occurring. We as a police agency didn't address it. And we go to homicide scene after homicide scene and say, well, we knew so-and-so, was going to do another one. But guess what? We never addressed that. We just go in the office Monday morning, and the conversation was, well, there's really not a lot we can do if people want to kill themselves. And if I ever get to that point, I don't need to be chief.
Right. Now, you mentioned a little bit about, the culture of Kansas City. How important is it for a police officer to know the community that he's working in?
It's critical that the leader understand the culture, so I can set the tone for other people when I talk about tactical disengagement and about the history of Kansas City. 1968, I was a young person, 5 years old, when they had the riots in Kansas City, and I still remember on television where I watched what I thought was military, the National Guard and the tanks riding down. I watched throughout time, even now when they talk about civil rights and things, and the dogs were turned loose on people and water hoses. We have that history in Kansas City. If you don't understand the disconnect between the police and other segments of the community, we have problems. So again, as a African American leader, I need to talk about that when we have meetings. I need to talk about why we as African Americans think like we think. When you look back at 1968, we had 66 homicides, and you go to 1969, we had 99, jumped 33 homicides, and we had never since 1926, and we've been keeping record, we had never gone over 100. So that showed me then, and that when you go to 1969 and you jump up so many homicides, and then you look at the years past. Then there's only been in the last 4 decades, probably 10 years where we had less than 100 homicides. And you look at the Rodney King incident, the early 90s, where people continued not to trust the police because all the things that happened with Rodney King. Homicide spiked higher than ever before. 1992, 152 homicides. 1993, 153 homicides. So you look at those things, and then you look at the media. That's another important piece I think we miss in this community. The media plays up the negative. They don't talk about it right now today. Today, we're down in burglaries, we're down in stolen autos, we're down in rapes, we're down in arsons. They won't talk about that. They'll talk about we're high in the number of homicides, but they don't talk about we high compared to last year because we hadn't been that low in over 4 decades. If you look back at 2011, 12, and 13, we're still lower today than we were then, but the media is not going to talk about that. And they talk about in the police profession about the representation of minorities in an organization. These same people talking about that, when you look at their employment data, who they hire and things, their numbers are way low. You look at the local media, whether it be print or whatever, their numbers are low, but then they'll come out and they'll evaluate us. We do need more minorities in law enforcement, but guess what? We need the right minorities. You look at Baltimore, what happened in Baltimore, over 50% of their police department's minority. Look what happened there. You need the right people. You need the right people.
So how do you recruit the right people? I mean, I know that being a police officer is one of the toughest jobs there is, but I mean, how do you recruit the right people?
We view everyone as a recruiter because so many people out in the community that we talk to in other segments of the community, they know people that they would like to police their communities. And that's what we need, not just our 2 recruiters on the police department. We need the faith-based leaders. We need the politicians. We need the people, families, friends. If they know someone that have those traits and characters that they would like to police them, bring them to us. Send them to us, because it's not just going to be, we stand up in a nice press uniform, go to an event, and people want to flock to us. And you have to sell. If you want some, you have to sell us, meaning the people out there that want the right people policing their community. You have to sell to that person the benefit of being out there and being out there and making a change, because we can complain. Everybody knows what's wrong. We talk about, racial profiling, which is real. When you talk about racial profiling, I've been profiled prior to becoming a police officer and as a police officer, because I was told, why I was stopped at certain times until they found out who I was. So profiling is real.
Yeah,
it's real. So, and it's in housing, banking, sports, education. It's everywhere. So, we can't think just because we swear in that, our biases are going to go away. And we give bias training. I've actually given it to all my command staff personally, things like that. But it's something that we have to continue. And you have to be real about what we've done to our community. We have to be real about it, admit it. I apologize for some of the things that have been done in law enforcement, not just even before I was born, because I own it now as the leader of this organization. So racial profiling is real. We're doing some things about it, and we'll continue to do some things about it. But you have to remember, there's no excuse. Racism and prejudice is in everything we do. Everything we do.
It's part of this country.
That's right.
Now, you just said something, and it got me thinking about something. This, I guess, it kind of started with the hip hop culture, but this no snitching policy that, I guess, the code of the streets. How have you all dealt with that? I mean, is that a real problem with citizens not coming forward and helping the police?
We would like more cooperation, and that's the reason I go to every single homicide. It was 18 last month. I go to every single homicide scene just to set the tone. And when you look at the Crime Commission and TIPS hotline, I think media perpetuates that stereotype. There's no snitching. We have so many people. Look how much money the crime commission pays out every year. We have people that call on a regular basis. Recently, we had a homicide in the Midtown where we had over 12 people at the scene said they wanted to go downtown. They said, I want to go downtown, and they're not looking for any money, any recognition. So we have almost every homicide. Someone comes forward. You look at the last two homicides. We had witnesses that it might not be enough to have the case filed, but a car description, a conversation that was overheard, or just anything. People are willing to talk, but I think sometimes in the media we have that those no snitch comments. So many people are willing to talk. So again, I think that's changing a little bit. We care, and we own a lot of that. I'd rather, even you talk about people giving us information after the fact. I like to have relationships where people share information before something happens. I'm close enough to someone where they can call and say, "Hey, Darryl, my cousin's mad at someone. He's carrying a gun. Can you talk to him? Can you come by here?" We need to do some things pre-incident instead of post-incident.
Now, if you're just tuning in, we are speaking with Police Chief Darryl Forte. I want to invite you to call in if you have any questions or comments. 816-576-7400. That's 816-576-7400. Now I want to switch back. We talked about tactical engagement earlier. Now, what is the difference between that and the old way the police used to handle?
The old way is where you just rush in. I could tell you right now, if you go into we get a call and we go into a small room and they have 5 police officers rush in there and someone's on PCP and they're armed with a knife. I can about tell you what the outcome's going to be. I'm telling our people, instead of everybody running in that room, if nobody else is in that room that you have to protect and there's only a suspect in there, back out of the room. Give it a little time, because if that person lunges at you with a knife, I guarantee you what's going to happen. And that's the way we've been trained, so we're retraining people. Starting in January this year, they're given other options. Critical thinking skills, let that kick in. The times when you dive into a vehicle trying to remove the keys out of the ignition and put it in park. That doesn't work. Sometimes back up, because if someone drives off, and we've been trained, if they're driving off, now you shoot them. Now you got a multi-ton vehicle going down the street with a deceased driver. So we're trying to be a little smarter.
Okay, well, we have a caller right now. Caller, you have a question or a comment?
Yes, I had a question for the chief. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
You all. I just wonder, is there any type of training set up in terms of stress? It seems like some of the officers, we all go to work with things on our mind or bring stuff from home and have a tendency to take it out on other people. So how do you all identify those type of officers? Or do you have a program where the officers come off of street duty, for 30 days to unwind? And that's my question. I'll hang up and listen to your answers.
Okay. Thank you for your question.
Yes, we do a number of things, and about 3 months ago, I made it known at a board meeting, and we put it out to all our officers and commanders and supervisors, that if they go on a call, say, for an example, a deceased child, and they have children, and our culture is that we don't ask for help inside the police organization. So I made a public stand, and I put some things out publicly, and we do a lot of things, but I'll just share this with you, that when someone goes on the call, as an officer, I'm not going to say I'm stressed out. I'm ready to go to the next call. It's up to the supervisor and the commanders and that officer's peers to say, "Hey, I think so-and-so is stressed out." Don't give them the option. Tell them to go to the station or go somewhere and get something to drink. So little things like that, I think, there's been some incidents around the country, and after we did the background, or someone did the background information, they found out what type of call they had just gotten off of. And we're human. We have the same stresses everyone else have, whether it be relationships, children, illness, and things like that. So we're trying to tap our officers out and making it safe. And another thing, meal breaks. We get a lot of complaints about 2 police cars being at a restaurant. I don't care if it's 10 now. We're getting ambushed all around the country. I had to show the officers that I support them. I understand what they're going through. So if there's 10 police cars parked somewhere at a restaurant, guess what? There can be 10 cars. We have to eat like everyone else. They work 10-hour shifts. And as a police organization, we've always shied away and catered to other segments of the community when there's too many police cars. But again, we're getting ambushed all around the country. And when officers are ready to eat, I want them to be able to eat, and with somebody watching their back.
Okay. Now we have another caller. Caller, you have a question or comment?
Yes, I have a comment. Good morning, Chief Forte and Brother Emiel.
Good morning.
This is Teresa calling from Enter Here Naturally. I want to comment on the topic and the subject and everything. You know, here in our community, we depend on the police officers and everything to control what's going on around us. And it's actually not all you guys' problem to solve. It's more or less the community. And so I challenge, you know, people of business, people that have homes in the community to just step up and step out and control your people, because if we don't show ourselves as a conscious people of movement, then we can create all the organizations we can, but I feel that it needs to be more organizations implemented within the community, not only with Kansas City Police Department, but within the communities. The churches need to come out, and the members of the church just need to come out on the streets. And people are scared at night. Do not be afraid, but people are crying out for help. That's why we having so many killings. We having so many drugs. I mean, people are just actually just running around just like crazy mad. And the number one key to all of this, if all of us will join together and pray for one another for peace, I feel that this city can be, we are the show me state. Let's show the United States that we are a show me state, that we can, as a people, put down whatever problem that we have. And you're right, we do see things before it happened. You have some of the citizens that we don't call the police. Well, I call the police. Well, everybody doesn't think like that. Well, okay, well, if you don't call the police, is there a mediator in your family? Is there a counselor? Is there someone that someone will listen to? So, you know, this radio station is a conscious-minded radio station. So all the people that are listening need to just send up a prayer and, okay, let's implement this. What should we do next? I already have my plan, what I need to do as a person living in this city, and I'm going to live in peace regardless. So thank you for the program that you guys have implemented and everything, but we got to do our part as a citizen of Kansas City.
I appreciate that, and thanks for the call. Chief Forte, you have a comment about that?
Yeah, thank you so much, because we hear so many people complaining and so many people blaming others, whether it be the police, school district, government, or whatever. It's refreshing to hear someone with a perspective that I agree with, put it like that, because again, it's easy to blame everyone else, but when you, and you said so many times, I, you're not saying what everybody else needs to do and what's not getting done. So I appreciate you so much. I really do.
Now, we talked a little bit earlier about officers getting, help with their stress. Is there anything that the police department does that focus on mental illness in the community? You know, there are a lot of, people in the black community who go untreated with mental illness. Is there anything the police department does with that?
We train our officers, crisis intervention teams. We train our officers to be able to identify mental illness, because again, when you look at the incidents where we've engaged, whether it's use of force or beyond firearms, we need to make sure we understand the population that we're dealing with. So crisis intervention teams, we train our officers on how to identify mental illness. So again, we know when to back up. We know when someone, what we call is suicide by cop. They want to be killed by a police officer. And we don't want, we don't want to do that to people. And most of us, when we're involved in a shooting, we have problems after that, because when we come on the job in the interview, they ask you why you want to become a police officer. Standard question is, I want to help people. None of us come to work wanting to hurt anybody. And then when we do that, we have problems after that, because we didn't want to hurt anybody. And we felt like, we had no option. And I want to tell our officers that there are options in some cases. And the subject or the suspect, they determine the outcome of a lot of what we do. But we want to make sure we're doing the right thing and we're trained the right way, and we adhere to that training.
Okay, we have another caller. Caller, you have a question or comment?
Yes, I got a question on ask.
Okay.
When you heard the young people's on, well, I call them young rookies, they don't supposed to keep questioning you when they come up to you, do they?
I'm not sure I understand the question. You said they're not...
They don't supposed to keep questioning you with the same thing over and over again. Last month, it was 2 hours down there at the coffee company cleaning up some cardboard, and one of their cars was Forte there, that Wednesday it broke down. Well, that Thursday, I see the clothes hanger over in the trash can, and it looked like it, been opened up for like you've been trying to break in a car.
Uh-huh.
And I walked up there to the car to see had anybody been tanking with it.
And the
Two
police officer questioned you?
Had drove up there, sitting there. They see me when I walked over there and walked away. And I told them, I looked to see had anybody been tanked with it, told them what a hanger was.
Uh-huh.
They didn't believe it.
So I appreciate your call. You're saying about questioning. Let me let the chief answer this question
you try
for
to
you.
break in that car. You try to steal that car.
Let me let the chief answer your question or try to answer your question. I guess he had a question about questioning.
Yes, it's our job to question. Hopefully you weren't arrested, but when something comes up and you're by a vehicle and the officers respond for whatever reason, whether it's self-initiated or they were called, they have to ask questions to find out what was going on. And hopefully you weren't arrested wrongly for anything. And I don't think you said you were arrested, but that's our job to ask questions. And hopefully they were respectful when they did that.
Okay, now I have a question we talked about before the caller. What is the police department's policy on how and when to use a firearm?
Well, when there's a threat, when there's a threat, a life and death threat, that's when they can use a firearm. Anytime they perceive a immediate threat to themselves or someone else, they can use a firearm.
Okay. Now, recently, a lot of these shootings, police shootings or whatever, have gone on around the country. They've been caught on camera. What is your opinion on police body camera? Is it something you agree with, or?
I absolutely agree with it. We have cameras in our vehicles now. The officers are mic'd up when they go on calls, so I'm totally for that. But we have to be real careful. Oftentimes, again, in the media, they talk about cameras, or cameras are talked about. But when you talk about cameras, you have to talk about privacy rights. If I would go into someone's residence in the city limits of Kansas City, Missouri, with the camera on, the neighbors can request footage according to our open records request. So if I was to respond on a burglary or whatever it is, and I have my camera on, the neighbors can request copies of that footage. If you have a rape victim, there's so many other things that you look at. And my key point, and I've been talking about this for a long time, if you don't trust me before we have a camera, you're not going to trust me with the camera, because if I'm pursuing a suspect on foot and I'm in a struggle and the camera vantage point turns and I have to shoot that suspect, if you didn't trust me in the first place, you're going to say, well, he turned the camera on purpose or whatever. So we got to build that trust. And before we implement cameras, which we will in Kansas City, before we implement a camera program, body-worn camera program, we have to talk about the capabilities and the limitations, educate everybody on those things, so we can talk about the circumstances where you're in a struggle and the camera might have been pointing all day the right direction, but when you're in a struggle after a foot pursuit or whatever, that angle may change. So again, without trust, the camera's not going to do a whole lot, as we've seen around the country.
Now, you've talked a little bit about the media today, but
Yes.
You actually have a pretty good relationship with the media, it seems like.
Absolutely. We've changed that culture before in our organization throughout, my 26 years before I became chief. It's always been that tension with the media. I'm not opposed to the media. I think the media is good. They're good. They tell the truth for the most part, but they don't tell the whole truth, in my opinion. And it's programs like this where I thank God I have the opportunity to come and share some of these things, because they don't talk about some of the things. Most of the time when I talked about the media, especially when I first became chief, when I was first appointed, I talked about the people that were trailblazers for me to get here on the police department and other segments of the community. When you talk about former commanders on the police department that applied for the chief's position and didn't get it, and they were scandalized and just talked about. So I appreciate all those people, and not just the commanders, some of the officers that pulled me aside and said, Darryl, you might want to watch this and this. So I didn't get here on my own. God put me here, and God will keep me here as long as I'm supposed to be here. But I don't want to forget about those people that paved this way for me to get here. It wasn't because Darryl was great. It's because some other people have gone through some trials and tribulations to help me get there. So I want to just say I love you all. Thank everybody. You know who you are, that had some impact in my life. But other media outlets never put that out there when I talk about that. So I appreciate you giving me this opportunity to share that.
Oh, that's great.
And when I talked about when we use force, I talked when we're in danger, life-threatening danger. I want to clear that up, because again, if I don't say the whole thing, people might say, well, just because you're in danger, you shouldn't shot him. Where it's a life-threatening situation, that's when we resort to things that we do.
Mm-hmm. You have a social media forum that you have?
Yes, I blog at Chief Forte on Twitter. and on Facebook.
What are these forums about?
I just talk about when I go to homicide scenes. I give information. I ask for information. I try to keep the public informed. Just anything that we're doing. I blog about the crime rate when other segments of the media didn't talk about comparing the numbers to previous years, and they didn't talk about the low burglary, arson, and auto theft and all those rates. I put that information out there myself. I think that's the perfect venue for me to, and I do that. Probably the best things I've done is put a blog out about internal bullying on the police department, because if we don't monitor ourselves, and then we go out there and we want people to do some things that we don't give them the tools to do inside. Because when I first came on, supervisor could curse you out and nothing you can do. They said, "Well, that's just part of it. Just sit down and shut up." We don't curse at people. We don't talk to people badly. I shouldn't be able to talk to anybody any more demeaning than they talk to me. So it's about respect at all levels of the organization, because we can't expect our personnel to go out and do that if we're not doing it internally. We've had bullying inside. I've been bullied before in the organization. So again, I talk about it. We're gonna be real. So you can't address it if you don't talk about it. I talk about racism, institutional biases, and practices that we've done for years. I'm gonna talk about those things. And again, after me being the first African American chief, if I don't talk about them, who's gonna talk about them?
Right, and that's a great thing that you're talking about them. And how can they follow these forums again?
At Chief Forte on Twitter, and Darryl Forte on Facebook. It's a public page now. I just made it public about a week ago, and it's DARRYLFORTE, and you can do kcpd.org to look at my blogs.
Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you want people out there to know?
I just want to say thank you, community, for being engaged. I plan on being around for a while. I love my job. We have great police officers. We make mistakes. I'll totally admit when we make them. But again, we need your support. Appreciate your support. And to all the people out there, too, that when you see a police officer, tell them thank you. We're going through a difficult time under more scrutiny than ever before. But I appreciate the support personally and for the organization. And thank you for this opportunity today.
Well, I want to thank you personally for coming on the show. I think you're doing a great job. And if you are just now tuning in, you missed a great show with Chief Darryl Forte. I want to invite you next week, same time, 11:30 a.m. on Tuesday. I will be talking to George Gates from Gates Barbecue. We'll be talking about the lack of black pitmasters around the country. Once again, you are listening to The Real Deal with Emiel, sponsored by MHG, your local trusted insurance partner, located on the corner of 18th and Vine. And I want to thank my guest once again, Chief Forte. See you next week.